my salary has stayed consistent, but the rent has gone up tremendously.
Rising rents coupled with the high cost of utilities just adding to the strain New Yorkers are feeling.
My coffee is like $8 every day.
Right, $8 coffee. So when you combine out-of-control living expenses with sky-high rents, you've got the makings of an extreme affordability crisis. A crisis which is growing, with recent rents having risen 18% since 2019. However, incomes have only risen 11% since then, and many folks feel like the city is trying to force them out. Yet not only do our leaders seem totally uninterested in dealing with this crisis, critics say some of their plans might be making it worse.
Despite the enormous size of the New York skyline, only a tiny amount of it is available housing. Just 1.4% vacancy, the lowest rate since the 1960s.
Rent is way too high.
I live in New York and Maryland, and it's a lot more expensive to live here than Maryland.
Do you think it's too expensive to live in New York City?
Yes, absolutely.
Of course, 100%.
New Yorkers know it. Now new data backs it up. Rents have been steadily rising in New York City in recent years, but incomes have not kept pace. Median rents in New York City rose 18% between 2019 and 2023. During that same period, incomes only grew by just over 11%.
Well, now a new poll finds as more New Yorkers struggle with rising food prices, they are cutting back on healthy foods.
I mean, you want to eat healthy, and you want to be able to be healthy, but unfortunately, the economy is not allowing for that.
A new survey shows 85% of New Yorkers say the cost of food is rising faster than their income.
New York is now so old and dilapidated that when we try to build new buildings to fix our housing crisis, the ones we already have might fall down. But what nobody's talking about is that housing costs here are rising so fast that soon many renters may find this city impossible to live in altogether. And with the median asking rent for any NYC apartment hitting $3,400 per month in August, it's no surprise why. Because to even qualify for a $3,400 apartment, you'll need an income of $136,000 per year, just for the privilege of selling all your possessions to move into a tiny little box. And even if you make $100,000 a year here in New York City, that only gives you around $36,000 of spending power after you take care of your rent and other essentials. Revealing this city may not be the land of opportunity many people claim it is, especially for those just starting out professionally. And critics say, at best, New York is a place where an overachiever with a high income skill can slave away just to pay their landlord's mortgage. And although there's nothing inherently wrong with renting, and living in New York City does have its positives for those wishing to advance their careers, the amount of money that costs a person may end up destroying one's finances before they even realize it. And that brings us to the real reason why rising living costs are such a big problem. They never seem to stop rising, and they're already at an unsustainable level. Yet while this is going on, our leaders are fighting over things that don't help New Yorkers get ahead in life, like banning cars, or finding little ways to continue crippling our understaffed police department, which is especially surprising when you consider that opposition to common sense plans like building new apartments, something everyone here should be talking about, often comes from progressives who claim to care about the everyday working man. And that's why, as you're about to see, everyday people here are waging a battle against affordability that they are probably going to lose. So if you want to go with Elon Musk to Mars in the future, you can get used to what that's going to be like right here today, because we're in one of the most affordable apartments anywhere in Manhattan. This is a $52.95 per month, 3-bedroom apartment. That's the same price as a 2-bedroom. And this is actually a really smart way to get a shower in a small apartment. You're not gonna hurt yourself in here. But even though the per person cost here is $1,765 a month per person, and you get queen size bedrooms, already that's a lot of money for an entry-level apartment experience in New York. And that brings up a big question. Who exactly are these tiny apartments designed for?
Do you think it's too expensive to live in New York City?
Yes, absolutely.
Of course, 100%.
New Yorkers know it. Now new data backs it up. Rents have been steadily rising in New York City in recent years, but incomes have not kept pace. Median rents in New York City rose 18%.
So the frightening thing about this is that since rents are rising faster than people's incomes, no matter where you live, or what it costs, eventually it'll probably be too much. And what that means is the person who should move here and rent an apartment like this is somebody who thinks they're gonna be on some sort of career path that will allow their income to outpace rental growth no matter what it is. But for most of us, that involves a great deal of risk. For example, when I first moved here, I was an accountant at a Big Four accounting firm, and after my first year at the company, I got a raise, which did help me afford more at the grocery store, but didn't provide me with a whole lot of extra upward mobility. And had my rent gone up more than my cost of living based raise, I might not have been able to stay. But then after talking to my coworkers, I realized why people move to New York in the first place. They move here to build up their resumes and their skills so that in the future, better opportunities will be available. But that kind of plan is incredibly risky because job markets change. Sometimes when the job market's great and companies are involved in a talent stealing contest with each other, you can go to one place, work there for a few years and then leave, get a huge raise. But when the job market flips, that might not remain the case. And over the last year or so, we've heard of people in all industries, even tech, where jobs were high paying and apparently very secure. Well, people are finding out their jobs might not be as secure as they once were, which is too bad, which has a lot to do with why incomes are not rising as fast as rents, because although we're in a housing crisis, employers are not facing a hiring crisis. Either way, moving to a city like New York and building one's professional skill set is an idea that's going to benefit you no matter what the job market is, and that's going to benefit whoever rents a place like this. But the problem with this is that it generally means whoever rents a market rate apartment is probably going to be somebody from another state who came here for a specific opportunity. And this housing crisis is especially bad for average New Yorkers who've lived here for generations and don't want to have to leave their homes. Because no matter where you live in a housing crisis, rents only go one direction, and it's the wrong direction.
Rising rents coupled with the high cost of utilities just adding to the strain New Yorkers are feeling.
My coffee is like $8 every day.
Groceries, food, just basic food, essentials to live, and also cost of transportation, driving, congestion tolls, all the new things that are, yeah.
So here's where we get to the point in our story where it looks like the pricing out of average New Yorkers is the fault of city leadership, at least in some way, because nobody wants to pay more for their apartment. Nobody wants to pay more for things at the grocery store. Yet some of our upcoming laws, like this congestion pricing scheme, may cause that to happen. And here's why. Many apartments like the one we're in require fuel, which is for the heating system. And that fuel comes into the city on a huge truck, which will get hit with extra fees just for being here. Ditto the food at your grocery store. There's going to be fees attached to that too. Now, everyone's hope, mine included, is that these little fees are disseminated throughout the pricing scheme of these businesses and nobody really feels it, and we do get some subway improvements. But there are some people who think that's not gonna happen. And that's because a lot of what has to take place in the city for us all to live here to begin with cannot involve public transportation, even brand new public transportation. Like all the renovation work that goes into a place like this to make it pretty much high end when you compare it to other New York City apartments. Every door, every piece of trim, every kitchen appliance, it all came here not on the subway. It came on some big truck. Things could get a lot pricier just to live in a place like this. But it's not just congestion pricing, that's only one example. The cost for water in this city has recently gone up because of a little scheme on behalf of the city, and water bills have gone up almost 10%. That's a lot. And you know what? In this apartment, the landlord's required to pay for your water. And the heat, he's gotta pay for that too. And restaurants, they're in the same boondoggle. They've gotta pay more for water. Think of how much water a restaurant uses. This stuff, all it does is just make the cost for apartments and businesses and any part of society to just costs more money than it needs to. Our leaders will tell us that it needs to cost more because it costs more for them, and it very well may. Inflation's a real thing.
Prices at the grocery store remain stubbornly high. In fact, federal data shows overall grocery prices have climbed more than 24% from 2018 to this year. Well, now a new poll finds as more New Yorkers struggle with rising food prices, they are cutting back on healthy foods. It is a tough reality.
So the problem here is that inflation is messing with everybody's budget. It's hurting New Yorkers when they go to the grocery store and try to buy stuff. And that news report from this past March shows that 85% of New Yorkers say food costs are going up faster than their paychecks, revealing that in New York, people have the same problems paying for things outside of their apartments and inside of them as well. And is some of this economic? Yes. Is some of this unavoidable? Absolutely. But the problem is New York is so incredibly progressive that some of the common sense solutions we could go after, which would bring down costs for millions of people, just aren't going to happen because those plans would mean that somebody out there gets rewarded for solving those problems. And for that reason, the only solutions that our leaders find acceptable are ones that make problems go away without giving anyone the incentive to go out there and solve them, which is why we still have them. So the problem New York has is not that everything is more expensive. Well, it is, but part of that is because you have a new building here, but most of the other buildings around here, they're a lot older than the 3-year-old cat in that deli. And by not building new stuff and focusing on that, costs to live here are just gonna go up.
Despite the enormous size of the New York skyline, only a tiny amount of it is available housing. Just 1.4% vacancy, the lowest rate since the 1960s.
How do we solve this crisis? It is so simple, my friends. We build, 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 build.
So New York is between a rock and a hard place here. They've figured out that the only way to get anything built around here is to give people an incentive to build it. If they make it tough to build things and take all of the reward out of doing that, there just aren't going to be enough new buildings. And if you ever hear business owners complain about how taxes in New York are too high, well, in order to get the business owners that will go out and build apartments that they sell or rent to do it, they needed to get some sort of tax break, which in a city full of stuff like this that's 100 years old is probably a good idea if it helps new properties come on the market before the properties we currently have on the market end up falling down, which is happening. And the problem is we've waited so long to deal with this that trying to build in certain parts of the city around other old buildings might cause those old buildings to come down as the new ones go up. And this article describes a problem where a developer of a new property next to a very old one is causing so much vibration and so much shaking that residents in the current structure are terrified. And tenants of this old property have reportedly run out scared that the building was going to fall down as construction workers were drilling and digging at the vacant lot next door. Here's a picture of the building in question. Right over here you can see the hole where they're trying to build something new. Now the buildings department thinks that the construction of this new facility is going to go just as it did when a place like this was put up, which is also next to some properties that are also very old. But these old properties, they're not in a state of disrepair. Their foundations aren't crumbling. But the reality here is that property owners are like independent small businesses. And some of them are better run and better managed than others, that's for sure. And if you make it hard to be a landlord in this city, you will have a lot of landlords who fail and whose buildings fall apart with people still living inside of them. Does that mean some landlords aren't greedy? No, but one thing's for sure, we'd probably be all a lot happier and safer if more apartments looked like this and not like this, which is the building directly next door. What a mess. But one thing's for sure, the landlord who's saving money probably has lower rents, so not everybody complains. But the problem is now we've waited so long to go about tackling this affordability crisis that the only places that people can afford look like this, and when we try to build new ones, these places might fall down, making this a zero-sum game. And if for every home in this city that gets built, we have another that doesn't make it, we're never gonna get out of this mess. And even though the common sense solution to this is to build as many apartments as quickly as possible to avert disaster, not everybody agrees with that.
As for the governor's announcement, tenants advocates worry it rewards developers while doing little to stabilize the poorest New Yorkers.
We need to get out of a system where the status quo
is being used to prop up the private profit of the real estate industry.
Now, I get it. Nobody wants to see a bunch of rich, well-connected property owners who are already multimillionaires get even richer. But the problem we're having is we're not helping new people get into that business and give these guys some real competition. The status quo that we have just enables the rich to get richer. And if our de facto view of housing is that anyone who is rewarded for creating it is somehow a bad, greedy person, we're never going to get more houses, because as the governors realized, the only way we've gotten more houses is by giving people a financial incentive to build them. Yet some people still want to stop new housing from getting built. They don't think that's how things should be done. Instead, they want an approach that takes all of the reward out of this. And even though advocates are right that greedy landlords who screw over their tenants and don't fix their buildings are part of the problem, for sure, the problem is the alternative to this, public housing with rents that are based on one's income, that's not working out either. And now you've got people who don't have heat this winter.
And one of the main concerns they have is the lack of clean water in their apartments. They say some of the conditions are inhumane. They have photos of different shades of water they say continue to come out of their faucets, paint in their apartments
That's appalling, man. The city really needs to do better, but the only way this stuff gets fixed is apparently when the people that run these operations do a little something under the table. Or after so much time has passed by, the residents have already had to move or make massive sacrifices like some of these families, revealing that greed comes from all facets of society, not just the private sector, that's for sure. And to fix this housing mess that New York is in right now, there needs to be some sort of balance. A balance between people making money and justifying their time and energy doing something, and average people being able to afford their rents without going completely bankrupt or having to deal with conditions that are so terrible nobody wants to live in these apartments. And we're not going to get that balance the way things are now, that's for sure. So all of these efforts to stand in the way of new housing legislation, they're just going to prolong the unaffordability crisis that we already have. And the governor seems to be aware of this. She's advocating for new homes to get built. And that has to happen quickly, because as we're learning, trying to build new homes in a very old city might mean that some of the old homes do not survive that process, which could just make things even more expensive while we try to go about solving it. How would you solve New York City's housing crisis? Is there something we could ban or make illegal that would make this all magically more affordable without building anything new? Let me know. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.